Get ready for the school year with Yumiko's annual back-to-school sale. Mix and match however you'd like within the basic collection, and upon purchasing 2 Leos, receive the third completely free. Whether you need black, burgundy, green, rose, or white, they have a handful of different styles to choose from. Kids and men's items are available to order too. Yumiko is also excited about its virtual shopping events through Instagram Live. 2 hosts showcase exclusive in-store options available to ship immediately, with different promotions offered at each session. If you haven't tuned in yet, be sure to check it out. The options shown are not available online, so it's the perfect opportunity to snag a unique Yumi at a discount. For more information on the back-to-school sale, live events, and summer stock availability, stay connected at Yumiko.com and at Yumiko on Instagram. I'm Rebecca King-Ferraro.
And I'm Michael Breeden, and you're listening to Conversations on Dance.
Today we are joined by Megan LeCrone, soloist with the New York City Ballet. Megan was born in North Carolina and at age 14 began studying with Melissa Hayden and Duncan Noble at the North Carolina School of the Arts. Megan entered the School of American Ballet full-time in the fall of 2001, and in November 2001, she became an apprentice with the New York City Ballet. She joined the company as a member of the Corps de Ballet in October 2002 and was promoted to soloist in February 2013. We talk with Megan about her training, what brought her to SAB, how she joined the company, dealing with injuries, and her close working relationship with Peter Martins. Well, thank you, Megan, so much for joining us. Again, we continue to do our remote podcast, but this is really fun to be together on Zoom and to see you. And we're glad that you are healthy and safe, and great to connect today.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for having me.
Is this our first non-domestic podcast? Have we ever done one internationally?
We must.
Megan is in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
So I can't think of it. You and I maybe did one from when I was in Hong Kong, but
that's for sure. Right. Okay.
Maybe,
so then, all right, we'll have to think about that, but I think you're right.
You're making us international, Megan. So that's great.
Always happy to spread the conversations and dance.
Love it.
So let's start from the beginning, Megan. When did you first become interested in dance or ballet specifically?
I always remember it being a part of my life. I grew up in the South in North Carolina, and my mother was really adamant about us having an enriching arts education. It wasn't necessarily offered in the public schools. So she put us in choir. We took piano lessons. Our neighbor, who was a painter, gave us painting lessons, and she put us in ballet at our local studio. I have 2 sisters, so we all grew up doing that, and I just always remember it being a part of my life. And but I will say, I think I experienced like a more visceral love for it when I was around 12 or 13. My studio was attending a ballet festival in the South called SERBA, which is Southeastern Regional Ballet Association. They do workshops.
SERBA.
Yeah. They do workshops and classes, and there's an opportunity for students to perform. And my school was very excited because we were a small school, and we had been allowed to rehearse and perform Balanchine's Valse Fantasy. And at the time, I knew Balanchine was a name, was something important, but I was so young and didn't have a lot of exposure, so I didn't really understand kind of what the history of his story was, why it was so important. But I was chosen by Alan Heinlein, who worked a lot with Central Pennsylvania Youth Ballet and was setting this ballet for us. I was chosen to be one of the principal dancers in Valse Fantasy. And the version that we were allowed to do was actually the 1953 version. Right.
Wow,
Which
I've
is
danced
not
that.
done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool.
So it's a male dancer and then 3 female dancers. And I danced the more featured female role. And I remember this feeling during the rehearsals, during the performances, that was just indescribable, really. I mean, it was just amazing. You know, the way I had never experienced my body moving that way, the musicality of the steps. And I think at the time, I probably couldn't articulate that was when I really fell in love with ballet. But thinking back, I think it, I think it was, and obviously at that time, you know, I was not thinking so far ahead about a career or which company to join. But since I did end up joining New York City Ballet, it's really like interesting and sort of a nice full circle to have had that experience, not knowing what was to come in the future. But yeah, it's such a visceral feeling that I had that has continued on in my life at different points. When I came to SAB, when I joined the company and started learning and dancing the Balanchine rep, it's just such a familiar feeling that you get when you do those ballets.
Right.
Was that your first experience with Balanchine style and or choreography up until that point? Your training was different?
Yes. My formal training was as I got older at the North Carolina School of the Arts, but my school in Greensboro, I wouldn't categorize them as a Balanchine school. It was very classical, like probably more Royal Ballet, RAD, although not official.
Right.
And I remember working with Alan, and I was young, you know, and obviously had a lot of respect for my teachers, but and we never really talked about this, but I remember kind of thinking, oh, some of the things that I'm being asked to do, or the way that I need to dance to accomplish this, is quite different from what they teach at my school, and I like it better.
Right. I love that.
You know, and it felt very organic to me and very natural. And so, yeah, there was a little bit of difference there, which I loved.
How did you decide to go ultimately to NCSA and do your training there, continue your training there?
As I got older, I realized that not only did I, you know, that I love ballet, but it was something that I wanted to continue. I wasn't finished with it. And, you know, when you get into middle school and high school, there's lots of things that change: social opportunities, academic opportunities, sports opportunities. I remember trying out for sports. I remember trying out for, I was trying to, I really wanted to fit in at school. And at that time, you know, most of my peers had stopped ballet. Right. And I remember trying out for cheerleading because I thought, well, I'll do this because this is a way to sort of stay cool and stay, you know, in the norm, I guess. And, but in my head, I said to myself, I know I'm going to get on the team because, you know, I'm a ballet dancer and all that. And I had decided before that I was going to say no because I wanted to continue my ballet. And so, you know, I got on the team and everyone was like, you know, in the South, sports are a very big thing. And everyone was like, this is so great. Like, you're going to be on not the junior varsity team. I got on the varsity team as a youngster. And they're like, you know, aren't you excited? And I was like, no, I'm going to say no. I just tried out to like see if I could do it. And they're like, why? And I was like, because I want to do ballet. And and then I sort of became this sort of strange person. And also I was growing out of my school, and I had been to a couple of summer sessions. I went to NCSA for the summer, and I had also the summer before trained at Atlanta Ballet. And I kind of did it on my own. I remember going to the library and taking this application form for the North Carolina School of the Arts and filling it out and going to my mom and saying, I need you to sign this. And my ballet teacher did drive me to the audition, and I got in, and they didn't have space for me. But then in January of my freshman year, they called and they said, we have a space in the dormitory. And I didn't live that far. I lived about 45 minutes away, but
Nice.
my mom was a single mom at that time, and it was too complicated for her to drive me back and forth.
Right.
So she said, if you want to go, you have to be able to live there, and you have to receive a full scholarship, because we just can't,
Right.
economically support it. And they did. The North Carolina School of the Arts is wonderful because part of the public school system. So they give in-state residents a break for the finances. So I received a full scholarship there to live in the dorms and to go to school. And I was so happy to do that. I mean, it was just amazing. We danced so much, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I remember being there and the students saying, that because we were technically part of the public school system in North Carolina. And I remember students saying, that we go to school the least amount of days that's legally allowed, because we only went to school on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, and for 4 hours each day. So it was very little academic, although succeeding in or doing well in my academics was important to me. But it was just 4 hours a day, 4 days a week. And on Wednesdays, we trained all day long in ballet, and in the mornings before school, and in the afternoons and in the evenings, we trained. So I really loved it, because at that point, that's sort of all I wanted to do was take class and learn variations.
At that point, Melissa Hayden was running the program, right? Can you tell us? Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
Well, I just want to hear about your personal experiences with Melissa Hayden, because she's such a character.
Yes, she is such a force for in my career and other dancers' career. Jillian Murphy worked very closely with her as well. She wasn't actually running the program, but she was a major teacher there. North Carolina School of the Arts is unique in their dance department because they really expose everyone to a lot of different things. I had Melissa, I had Nina Danilova, who taught a very Vaganova class. I had Cunningham. I had lots of teachers who had come from ABT. So we got we were versatile in a way. But I worked with Melissa a lot. I was in the advanced class, and she taught every day, twice a day, technique class and point class. And then in the evenings, if I wasn't rehearsing for a performance, the great thing about that school also is we got a lot of performing opportunities. She would give, another workshop of variations. And I remember thinking when I left the school, I could handle any director now after working for her, because just the tension and nervousness and fear, but also desire to please and to just continue to work until she said yes was so strong. And she was a very intense person to work with. I think it really enabled me to sort of handle other personalities. It was exhilarating being with her. And I remember just feeling like I needed to be a sponge, because she gave things so quickly. She didn't explain a lot. So you really had to be physically present and mentally present, and emotions there was no place for emotions. It was just it was very simple. You work and you do. And she, like I said, she didn't explain a lot, and she would say no a lot, which getting into New York City Ballet, I experienced this a little bit with Peter when I was young. You would do something and she would say no and not tell you why or what was wrong. And she'd say no again, no again. And you would just have to do it over and over. And I don't know if this is what she was trying to get at, but I never really, when she would say yes, she would never tell me why. But I remember being like, oh, I think I finally just like stopped thinking and did it. So she had an interesting approach. And I do remember, I had many teachers at NCSA, but what I liked about Melissa, and I think at the time when I first started, I hadn't made the balancing connection yet, but I do remember having that visceral feeling again with the steps she gave, the ballets that we learned. She taught a lot of balancing variations for our rep classes, and we performed some of them. And I remember that feeling coming back and thinking, oh, this is like that type of movement that I like. Because I also, did Paquita and Bayadere and very classical things, and then had modern classes. But I just really loved the classes that she gave, and the way she sort of led her class, and ultimately like the choreography.
Yeah. So you said you hadn't made that balancing connection just yet, but you did ultimately make that connection, and that took you to the School of American Ballet. How did that all kind of come about?
So, when you're in high school and you're at a school similar to NCSA, you learn that it's possible to make a living and to become a professional ballet dancer. That's a real thing. And so we were sort of a central school in North Carolina, so auditions would come through for summer sessions, for various things. And I knew I wanted to continue training in the summer always. And I knew that just through word of mouth that, I wanted to go to the best schools. And I knew that you audition for SAB and you should audition for ABT. And then I think the only other place I auditioned was for San Francisco. And North Carolina School of the Arts has an interesting relationship with American Ballet Theater, because when I was there, the American Ballet Theater Studio Company would come and do a residency with us. And they would spend 3 weeks, and the advanced students at the school and the studio company would take class together and perform together. And I did that. I worked with, when Misty Copeland was in the studio company, and Marcelo, John Meehan was running at the time. So I worked a lot with him. And I was actually offered a job by John into the studio company, which I think the school wanted me to take. At the time, we had a lot of people going to ABT. But I turned it down and I said, no, I'm going to the School of American Ballet for the summer program. And, I just wanted to sort of continue the ladder, so to speak, to get to the source, to see what it was like there. And I knew Melissa had come from there. She was very practical, though. She said, you have a job, you should take a job. And I said, I know, but I just want to go to SAB. And she said, well, you don't know anything about New York City Ballet. And I said, I know, but. And I'm very glad I made that decision. So I spent 3 summers there. And then when I was 17, I finished, after my first summer, I went back to North Carolina and decided to consolidate my academics because I really wanted to just be done with that.
Get it done.
Check it out.
So I started doing correspondence, and I was able to finish my high school in 2.5 years. So I didn't have to worry about that. And so then I went back for 2 more summers to the School of American Ballet. They asked me to stay the second summer, and to this day, I don't know why I said no, but I said no. And fortunately, I was able to come back for my 3rd summer, and they didn't ask me, but at the end of the summer, I had a little meeting, and I said, I finished all of my school and I'm ready to come if it's possible. And they said, well, there's probably a space for you, but we're not sure, like, if you'll get into the company. And I said, well, that's fine. Technically this would be my senior year. And now that my my academics are done, I could just stay here and train and see what happens, and obviously audition if that's necessary. And so after the summer, I was invited to stay on at the school for the winter or fall winter term, which was very short for me. Actually, I was there for about 8 weeks, and then I was invited to join the company as an apprentice. That was in 2000.
Wow. It was that quick? That's so great.
It was very quick. I think I was
that.
only, I was in the fall semester for 8 weeks, and then 3 5-week summer sessions.
Isn't that a great story for students out there that, right? You basically had to be like, please, 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 please let me in. They're like, well, we don't know about the company. And then 8 weeks later, like, come on, fight for what you believe in. I like it.
So what was that circumstantially? How did that come about? Like, that's kind of a strange time to be taken in, right? Unless sometimes people for Nutcracker, but what was the atmosphere at that moment? Why did he need you then?
Yes, it was. And I think the way the New York City Ballet takes people has changed. It's usually right after workshop. I, of course, didn't do a workshop, and people would talk about it. I didn't really know what that was. But when I arrived in the fall, all the students came back, and I didn't know anybody because of the summer. It's completely different from the year-round students. And I remember people saying, none of the people that had done workshop, that had featured roles, that had gotten the Wien Award, no one was taken into the company. Peter hadn't taken anybody, but apparently he or the school had told people, not to go anywhere, to come back. So I started in C2, and then I was advanced to D a couple weeks later, and
so that D is the highest level for our listeners who
for Rebecca.
For Rebecca.
Yes. And I remember sort of the gossip. I didn't know anything, so I was just sort of hearing things and trying to sort it out in my head. And I remember sort of the gossip being like, oh well, D is the highest level, but Peter only takes from C2.
Oh, that was so common.
So,
that's
so
stuck around for a little bit.
Maybe, I won't be taken, but at least I'm in an advanced level. And, of course then it became interesting to me. I was like, well, wait, I really want to, why, I want to be taken. Because I think when I started, I really understood what the school had told me. And I was like, it's important to continue your training, and it's good on my resume. And I had planned to audition, and if I got nothing, to go to college. But so he hadn't taken anybody. And there was sort of a 2-week lead up to him taking a group of us into the company. So everyone was on high alert those first few months, because they knew, it's Nutcracker. Either he's gonna be looking. Certain people had been told to come back, and there was a choreographic institute where students choreographed on each other at the school. And I was in 2 pieces. I was in one piece choreographed by Zolly Grenberg, who is now the director of Carolina Ballet. I was also in a nice pas de deux that was choreographed by Keith Mearns, Sarah Mearns' brother. So prior to that institute, Peter came and watched one point class that Kay Mazzo taught. And it was the second time I had seen him. He had taught once before at my summer program, and we didn't really have any interaction. He definitely did not pay attention to me. But in the point class, I remember feeling this tension in the room that was just so thick you could cut it with a knife. And I was so new that I was just, I didn't have all that. And I remember liking the fact that he was in the room. Something about his energy made me feel very relaxed. So I just had fun and danced and smiled. And also I remembered being with Melissa, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's no point in getting nervous about this. Like, I worked with this very intense person. There's nothing worse than that. So he watched that, and I remember leaving the class thinking, I'm just glad that I like had fun and felt good, and I thought I danced well. I tried not to approach it as an audition. And then the ballet mistress from New York City Ballet watched a technique class, and then
that was Rosemary.
Yeah,
Rosemary Dunleavy. That's unusual.
It is.
Yeah,
I think so. I don't know. Like I said, I didn't.
I don't think.
Spend a lot of time
I haven't heard anything about Rosemary, but it would make sense that would actually make more sense if you think about it, since she is so responsible for
Nutcracker, liqueur.
Yeah, and getting those
and lots of the entire for all the ballets.
Right.
It's a funny story about Rosemary. So she watched Madame Tchaikovsky's class, which was just a very difficult class, and because I was new, I always worked hard in it. But I think students that had been at the school a while knew that because of her age, they could sort of get away with not trying so hard in her class. And one day I noticed that everyone was really trying hard. And I had gotten so fed up because I was like, I'm trying so hard and no one else is. I'm just going to kind of start to do what they do. And they had been trying so hard. And I think it was also like around the time the Institute was happening, and we had lots of guests coming in and out and parents watching. And I thought, oh, they're really performing because their parents are here or whatever. And so I left class, and my friend, Andrew Kraminski said, what are you doing? And I said, oh, it's Toomey's class. Like, I've done my 7 weeks of working hard. Like, I'm going to take it easy. My parents aren't watching, so I don't need to go in there. And he said, well, you should go back because Rosemary's watching. And I was like, who's that? And he said, it's the ballet mistress for New York City Ballet. And he pointed her out to me, and I thought she was someone's mother. So I ran back into class, and I thought, oh no, like I've just totally ruined it. So that happened. And then we did the performance of the Institute. And like I said, I was in 2 ballets, and I remember Peter's eyes. He had very penetrating eyes, and I remember them being on me and liking it, but also thinking, whatever happens is going to happen. At least he's interested in enjoying this performance. And then it was the weekend, and then on Monday we were in class, and before class the registrar came around to different girls and asked us to go into a meeting after class. And I went, and Peter was in the music room at the School of American Ballet, and there was a large group of us. It was 3 boys that were taken, and I believe it was 7 girls. I think there were 10 of us. It was
a whole 10. Group. 10 is the maximum that you can have at any given point.
Yes.
So it was the full crew.
It was the full crew. And he said, I would like you all to join the New York City Ballet as apprentices. And it was very simple, and that was it. And I left, and I said to my friend, who was also new at the school, and he was in the men's program and had been offered an apprenticeship. And I said, I don't think he knows who I am, and I think he maybe has me confused with someone else. Do you think I should go back in and introduce myself and say, I'm Megan, I'm from North Carolina, I just got here. Are you sure, like, you have the right person? And he said, you're crazy. No, you're starting work with New York City Ballet tomorrow. Just show up at work. And so I did.
Wow.
Yeah.
How is that unusual to be taking apprentices in right before Nutcracker, or does it normally work more that you go and do Snow and Flowers as a student and then get your apprenticeship later? How does that normally, or is that normal?
Now, what happens is people, finish at least a full year at the school, and they do a workshop or not. Some people have gotten in without being completely featured in workshop, and then a decision is made at the end of the year, and then they start in the fall.
Gotcha.
And I think that just makes more sense for, scheduling and for students to know what's going on in case they need to say yes or no to other opportunities. But I think, there have been times since I've gotten in the company where people have been taken in for Nutcracker in addition to dancers that were that they had already decided about in the summer. I really just think it's based on the need.
Yeah.
And that was a very interesting year, the year that I got in, because no one had been given an apprenticeship at the end of workshop. Although, like I said, people had been told to come back. So there was, I think, space for a large group. And it was also...
One thing that I am thinking, I was just wheels turning, trying to think of if anyone else got their apprenticeship without any workshop or specifically from the Choreographic Institute. Alexandra Antonelli, you're in good company.
Yes.
You and Antonelli.
I think I heard that when I got in the company. I definitely felt when I got in, I was like, my situation is rare. Because like I said, I had not spent a lot of time at the school, during the year-round program. I did not do a workshop. So I felt very fortunate. It sort of gave me a little bit of pride, but it was difficult because I think there were a lot of things I had to catch up on. But there have been some other dancers that have come from other companies or from, only spending like a small amount of time at the school. So it's not the norm. It's rare, but it's possible.
So transitioning from student life to company life is always a transition for everyone, right? It's completely different. But for you, you really had one day to plan for that transition and to start to adjust. So what was that adjustment period like for you?
For the practical things, it was pretty easy because I had at that point really essentially been living on my own since I was 14. When I left home and went to North Carolina School of the Arts, I didn't go home a lot. I stayed at the school, and then in the summers I was in New York. And like I said, we really had experience performing and having rehearsal days, even though we were students. And also at that point, I was financially on my own. My family was going through sort of a complicated situation. So practically, I felt prepared. I felt very independent. I didn't feel like I didn't know how to do things, but it was definitely a mix of intimidation and excitement being with the New York City Ballet. When I got in, it was a really exciting time. There was so much creativity going on. The Diamond Project was still happening, which was, we would do 10 new ballets in one season, in addition to the Robins and the Martins and the Balanchine. So it was just like this time of so much creativity, and young people were getting so many opportunities. This is when Ashley Bowder was about to be promoted. Janie Taylor, Alexandra Antonelli had been promoted. But also you had Helene Alexopoulos was still dancing, and Margaret Tracy and Kira Nichols, and so I was in the company with these people that had worked with Balanchine and taking class with them. And then, sort of the in-between was just such an all-star group. It was Jock, Nikolai, Neil Oss, Charles Askegard, Peter Bull, Monique Mounier, Yvonne, Margaret and Kathleen Tracy, Darcy, Wendy, Maria, and just everyone was dancing so incredibly and took company class every day. Albert Evans, another one. So it was just incredible. It was so incredible.
Something I wanted
to be there then.
All right, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Something I want to that you talking about this time is kind of triggered this memory is that it was so much, honestly, just frankly, more difficult back in that time. The seasons were how long? 8 weeks long?
Yeah.
Winter and spring was 8 weeks, and there was no fall. And there was no block programming. So every program would be different. So it was a lot more chaotic. So
yes, I remember being exhausted all the time. And after a year of my apprentice year, just hurting all the time. Yeah, it was a lot of work. And apprentices are given their contracts like after they perform 8 or 9 ballets. And I remember for our group, they would purposefully not cast us in things, even though they needed us, because we would have gotten our 8th or 9th ballet. And then received an early corps contract. So we were very, very, very busy, not only dancing in the corps, but several of us were learning and understudying principal roles. And yes, like you said, the seasons were very different. We had, I think, like a 3-week rehearsal period for Nutcracker, a long Nutcracker, and then you went straight from your last Nutcracker show, the end of December, 1st of January, Sunday off, Tuesday night was opening night, winter season, performing. Right. And then you performed 8 weeks, had a little break, rehearsal period again for the spring, and then a long spring season. And Saratoga was quite longer too. We were there for 3 weeks. So yeah, it was a lot of work. And the level, like I said, the people that were dancing, the principals and soloists were very, very, very busy. And the level of dedication and expertise that they brought, just, I think, for all of my group coming in, I never remember marking a rehearsal once or wearing sneakers, or just never, even in the back. I mean, we were just constantly full out, 100%. Because that's the environment that it was. It was just so hardworking and so exciting. And it was a really, really amazing time.
So you said that already in your days of being an apprentice, people from your group were starting to get opportunities. I know that you learned things very young as well. What were some of the first things that you were called to that were more featured roles?
I understudied Alexandra and Janie Taylor and Darcy actually a lot. I did a lot. I understudied a lot of Martin's. He did a ballet called Reliquary. And there were 2 principal dancers in that. And so I understudied that. I understudied the principal in Hallelujah Junction, very young. Agon, Pas de Deux. I started learning really, really young. So let's say the first featured Martin's ballet that you were called to, how did that feel? Like, that has to have been, I know that the Balanchine ballets are iconic, but when you have your own director putting you in their own work, was that sort of a sign to you that, like, you were going to have a positive relationship with your boss and things were going good? Well, like I said, we didn't really speak that much in the beginning. And so, yes, inevitably I knew that. I thought, well, it's good. It's the boss. But in the moment, I didn't really think of it that way. I remember liking him and being attracted to the way he taught class when I was at the school, and being attracted to, like I said, these penetrating eyes. And I remember the feeling I got when I danced in front of him at the school was just like ease. And so I was very happy because, yes, of course I cared about the Balanchine, but I really liked his work. I liked the movement. It made sense to me. So I was excited because I was like, oh, this is just so nice because this makes sense. I had a really hard time with the Robins. I learned a lot of Robins, and I don't know, I had a hard time picking up choreography. But for some reason, learning his ballets, not just the more featured roles, but I was in the core of a lot of his ballets. I didn't have that problem in the beginning. I wasn't nervous. I just felt like I could just be myself, and it was fun, and I could go on forever and ever. Whereas in other rehearsals, I would, you sort of get confused or, and then, I learned that there was a larger Balanchine rep than the one I had learned at NCSA, and that there were some very, very difficult steps. And I think I started to maybe be like, I don't know if I relate to this Balanchine anymore because it's hard, but I definitely related to Peter's work because I think he, was obviously like inspired by Balanchine, but his work was, I would classify it as like definitely more in the neoclassical, way. Then that was easy for me, although found it in classical steps, but it was a little jazzier, which I liked.
Is there a reason that Robins would be more difficult to pick up? Is it like the way that the coaches approach things, or you just thought the sequencing, or
I just think it's because there was a lot of people in the room, know, and everything starts to the left, and I just the amount of like input that was coming in, just so many people in the room, and a lot of the, Victor Castelli was there at the time teaching, and he was wonderful. But, I think he was used to teaching people that had kind of knew these ballets. And that was the first time I had ever been exposed to Robins. And I liked it, but I just had a hard time remembering because I would get distracted by everything else that was happening in the room. And I remember trying to learn in West Side Story, and like, which is not ballet. And I was just awful. Like I couldn't ground myself. I couldn't do it.
So throughout your career, you've dealt with quite a few injuries, some of which have sidelined you for quite some time. Can you tell us a little bit about some of these injuries and your process coming back and getting stronger with each time you go out?
Yeah. Well, like I said, we were very, 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 very busy. And I remember during Nutcracker, during the end of Nutcracker, I performed in every show, Snow, Flowers, Spanish. I remember noticing a difference between my, not stamina, but my muscular endurance, as opposed to the other girls. Because I think of the training that they had at the School of American Ballet. See, in North Carolina, we didn't wear our point shoes for ballet class. We only wore them for point class. We only wore them for rehearsals. We only wore them for performances. And then I had, modern and all this stuff. So I remember thinking, oh gosh, like I'm just not as, it was harder for me to recover because I just wasn't used to being in point shoes all the time. And I remember the winter season starting and thinking like, being upset that I couldn't keep up, so to speak. And then, unfortunately, fortunately after that year, I was accepted into the company as a corps member. And, that's when I started learning some principal roles, and I didn't know how to pace myself. As an apprentice, I had gone 100% all the time. And now being in the corps, I didn't know that, when you're understudying certain things, you take it easy. When it's the complete, that's when you do it. I don't mean take it easy being lazy, but you have to pace yourself. Of course.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know how to do that. I just thought you need to be 110% all the time. And I started to, I was learning things, and I thought, maybe I'm not, I don't have the experience at the school, but I'll just be the hardest worker. And if I just work hard, it'll keep me, up there. And it started to work against me. And I had an ankle injury that required me to take time off, and then more time off, and then more time off. And I ended up having a tear in one of my tendons that just went undiagnosed forever. And I would try to come back, and all of my scans were showing nothing. And so, we thought there's nothing wrong, just have to get stronger. And I ended up having exploratory surgery after a year. And there was a very large tear in my tendon, in my right ankle. And then after that,
was it your Achilles, or what was it?
It was in my FHL.
Yeah. That one you used to go on point.
Exactly. Yeah. I remember asking the girls in the corps, like, do you guys feel like, I know ballet's hard, but do you feel like there's like a nail in the back of your ankle every time you go on point, because I was like, if this is how it feels, maybe I just need to get used to it. And they were like, no.
I had a tear in my post-tib tendon, which is like right next to
very
the
similar,
FHL.
yeah,
very, very similar. And I would just always tell the therapist, I'm like, I don't know, it just feels like my tendons are bleeding. And they're like, no, but everything's fine. Same with no scans. And then it turns out there was actually bleeding happening. That's so I really know exactly what you mean by that.
And the technology now is so much better that they can catch them, and the way MRIs are sliced, it misses millimeters, and sometimes that is what you need to see. So
right,
exactly. The tears were missed, and but that's life, right. But I'm glad I decided to get the surgery. It was very, very successful. I had taken 2 years off, total, a year of conservative treatment, and then I got the surgery, and then a year of surgery rehab, and then I was back, and I was great. And then I felt the same thing on the left side, and I didn't wait. I was like, I know what this is. Let's do it. So I had that surgery. And then unfortunately, the recovery wasn't the same. And I knew that it was possible to have a very good recovery because I had had one, and it wasn't the same. And I was not willing to accept that. And so I did have to have the surgery redone. The left side was a little more complicated. They had repaired the tear the first time, but I had a hidden bone spur that was not taken out. So after they repaired the tear, it just tore again because of this.
Right.
Which took a little bit of, detective work to figure out why that hadn't been possible. So then now I'm here on my third surgery, losing a lot of time, a lot of opportunities.
How many years had you been with the company now at this point?
My first surgery, I had only been with the company 2 years. Okay. And then my second surgery, I think I had been there 6 years, the 2 years in the beginning, the 2 years were off. Then I think I had about 2 years where I was dancing, and then I was off again for probably another 2 years. And then it just, things just sort of just kind of spiral downhill physically for me. I had, a knee injury that I ended up having surgery for. And then during the recovery, I just noticed that my body wasn't healthy. I was having nervous system problems. And I was thinking about, why am I having all these surgeries and these injuries? This isn't normal. Like, I'm doing everything. And I found out that I had an underlying disease that affects your nervous system, and it affects sort of just the general health of your body. And the treatment for that was surgery. And I wasn't afraid of surgery because I hadn't, at this point, had 4, 3 on my ankles, 1 on my knee, but I just knew it wasn't the right thing to do. And I did a lot of research on how to, it's not a life-threatening disease. I did a lot of research on how to manage it as an athlete, as a dancer, without having surgery, because there was a feeling inside me that was like, don't do it, and I listened to that because I knew it wasn't coming from a fear place, because I wasn't afraid of surgery. Knew it wasn't right. So, I had to work through that. And then I was back dancing, and just some accidents happened. I had a spontaneous pneumothorax, which is when one of your lungs collapses. So that happened, which took me back into the hospital for a few weeks. And then I remember finally being healthy, and I had gotten my disease to a point where I could manage it. And I had changed my diet and made a lot of life changes just to sort of handle all this. And my lung was better. And I had not taken a vacation yet. Like, it had always been about like dancing and recovering. And I thought, I'm so good. Like, I'm going to go on vacation. And my first day of vacation, I was riding just one of those big beach cruiser bicycles on the beach, which are like impossible to flip over. And of course, I flipped mine over. I went into a ditch and flipped over the handlebars with no helmet, and I broke my neck. Thankfully, I say thankfully because it could have been a lot worse. And I remember calling Debbie Coolish, who was Peter's assistant at the time, and saying, I'm not going to be back. I've broken my neck. And so I spent that was right before Saratoga. So I spent the entire summer rehabbing my broken neck. And I wanted to come back. So then we had the fall season then, and I really wanted to be back for fall season. Mm-hmm. And I had done all this work, and I said, I'm not sure if it was a phone call or an in-person meeting. I think it was a phone call. I had said, I'll be back for fall season. Maybe it was with Rosemary, because I hadn't talked directly to Peter yet. I was just he was getting all the info, and he did call me, and he said, I'm not going to let you do fall season. I know that you really want to, but I don't want this to be a pattern. I want all this to be over. No more injuries, no more nothing. So I think you should take the fall season, and don't worry, you're still a part of the company, but just really, really, do class, if you want to come around, do whatever, but I'm not going to put you on stage until Nutcracker. And that was wonderful. I listened to him, and I got back, and I came back to Nutcracker. I was still in the corps, and I did Dewdrop, which was wonderful. That was the first principal role that I performed when I was younger. So it was sort of like a nice coming back. And then after that, I was okay. I had a consistent time.
Through all of this, it's not like you were just, it wasn't just a series of injuries. You were on stage for long periods of time in the middle of these injuries, and
a little bit. Yeah. I was in and out. It would be, go ahead.
Yeah, good. No, I was just going to say that it was this sort of like, okay, I'm back in and ready to fulfill this promise. And Peter always supported you, and you would always have these, you would always get opportunities. So what was it like being kind of bandied about, like, okay, I'm on stage doing Dewdrop. Okay, my neck is broken. Okay, right. I'm on stage doing this.
I think it was probably more frustrating for him and for other people than it was for me. I mean, of course it was incredibly frustrating for me, but because it's just like, he was like, I just never know, like, you're back, and then I give you stuff, and then you're out again. Mm-hmm. And it was frustrating because when I would come back, I would get a lot of opportunities, but I would also have a lot of core work. And it was really important to me to be a good company member. I didn't want to pick and choose roles, and I was in the corps, and I wanted to be able to do everything. And, and I remember having a conversation with him one time. He had cast me in Symphony in 3. And in the same show, I had to do the core of Balanchine Swan Lake. And I was like, oh, I'm just not going to be able to do both of these. Like, it's too, I was okay, but I was sort of still coming back.
Right.
And me just being so like humble, I said, maybe it's best if I'm in the corps, and if I can't do Swan Lake and Symphony in 3, maybe it's just best to make everybody happy that I'll just do the core of Swan Lake. Mm-hmm. And he said, are you kidding? I rarely get what I want, and I want you to do this ballet, and I will talk to Rosemary and make sure that your core roles are lighter. So that was really wonderful. He was really an advocate of mine and a mentor. And I think he saw how hard I worked and how, I tried to handle everything. I didn't want to necessarily receive special treatment. I wanted to be able to do my full job. Mm-hmm. And I think he appreciated that. And also when I was out, I came to the theater a lot. I watched so much. And I think he saw that and appreciated that. So he would try to take care of me, but I think he would get frustrated because even with that, with trying to take care of me and make it, this protected environment, I was still having so many problems. Mm-hmm. But, I knew, and lots of people told me, maybe this isn't for you. And I think people told him, maybe you shouldn't employ her. It's just, she's just always, out. And he told, at this point, we were having to have very frank meetings, conversations, which in hindsight, I got to know a lot about him. I think he got to know a lot about me just as people, that we wouldn't have known if this hadn't have happened. But we would, we would have to, have these conversations about how to handle it. But he did tell me, there's people on the 4th floor that are questioning my decision to keep you in the company. And I said, well, there's my friends and family are questioning my decision to continue to do this. And the doctors are, and the therapists are. And I said, I cannot control the decision that you make, but I can tell you that I know it is not time to stop. And it may seem like that, but I just know it's not. And he said, okay, I trust you and I will wait for you forever. And I'm so glad that I had that feeling, whether he said that or not, I was going to just continue and continue and continue until I knew deep down that it was over. But I'm glad that he trusted me. And I think we were both very happy in the end because, it was a long forest to walk through, but very, very long. But I'm glad I didn't give up, and I'm glad he kind of quietly waited on the side. He left me alone for a while, really left me alone, and I am where I am today because there was just this inner voice in me that was like, yes, you feel bad and you feel down, but I just knew like it wasn't time. I just knew. I was like, it's not time to give up. It's not time to give up.
Yeah. And it certainly,
and I couldn't explain it.
It wasn't time to give up because then in 2013, Peter did promote you to soloist. So what did that moment feel like, especially for someone who had fought through so much to get to where you were? What was that like for you? And what was that year leading up to your promotion like?
That year was pretty uneventful. I just felt really stable. I was hoping to still be, considered to be promoted, but I really just wasn't, I was just trying to do my job really well and to improve. And I had, my casting had sort of changed a little. It wasn't as exciting as it was in the beginning, but I just really remember trying to kind of be consistent on stage because I did kind of go through a period where, I wasn't as comfortable in my skin as I had been when I was younger. So, I was surprised a little bit that I had gotten promoted or that, at that time, but I also wasn't because I knew the work I had put in and I knew the kind of foundation that I had started with. Mm-hmm. It's funny, right after I got promoted is when I broke my neck, and I think he just kind of threw his hands up in the air like, what is going on with you? So it really, and it didn't change anything for me. And he actually asked me that. He asked, we were on tour in Copenhagen right after my group had gotten promoted, and we were all on this boat together coming back to the hotel from the theater. And he asked us, so what has changed for you guys? Since you've gotten promoted, do you feel different or do you work differently? And I said, I was like, no, I mean, I always tried to, doing the maid and Nutcracker was as important as mm-hmm. doing Dewdrop, cause that's just the environment the New York City Ballet created for me. So I said, I don't feel like I work any differently or work, it was nice though, because, your rep changes, I didn't have a lot of core responsibilities anymore. So I was like, thank God I can, have some recovery time.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But I was a soloist for a while before I think things really started to sort of pick up more for mm-hmm. me in the way or close to the way that they did, they were when I was new in the company. And like mm-hmm. I said, I think he kind of left me alone. He was afraid, I think, to add anything. I remember him saying once, it's just so important for me that you're here. And I don't want to, I'm so scared to mess that up. I would rather you just be here than for you to be out.
So maybe he was kind of waiting to give you extra workload until he felt like you were fully recovered.
Yeah, maybe, or just maybe thinking, if this is what it is, this is what it is. I had plans and, she had dreams, but wouldn't you rather have something than nothing?
Right.
And so it was kind of like that for a while.
Gotcha.
But that changed by the end, which was nice. Before he left. Yeah.
What were some of the final opportunities you had under Peter's direction that you?
Well, again, his ballets, Hallelujah Junction. I did end up performing the principal in that. The Red Violin. I did some demi-soloist roles in Fearful. I understudied the principals in Fearful a lot. I never performed them. Lilac Fairy in Sleeping Beauty. Right before he left, we were in Saratoga and he called a meeting with me, and we had really not had meetings or anything. And I thought, oh no, like what is wrong? Because I wasn't, consistently going to company class at the time. That's not to say I wasn't doing class. I was kind of doing my own thing to be able to rehearse and get on stage. And I thought maybe he's going to say, I always tried to go to his class, although sometimes I did skip, which is not advised. And anyways, I remember thinking like it's either going to be good or bad. So whatever. So I walked in and he said, first of all, the past, your injuries and everything, do we need to talk about it? And I said, no, unless you have questions. And so he put his hand on the desk and moved it over like, you're slicing this paperwork away. And he said, okay, so that's done. And I said, yeah, I don't think we need to go there. That's the past is the past. And he's like, how are you? And I was like, I feel great. I feel really good. My body feels good. And he said, I don't think I have been doing my part. I think you can go all the way still. Do you want that? And I said, yes, of course, of course I do. And he said, I don't think I've been doing my part to sort of curate your career. Not that I haven't wanted to, but you haven't been here a lot and other dancers come in and I have a whole company to take care of. But I've watched you work through all this stuff and I have left you alone because I am so afraid for you to get injured again. And I need to know, if you're healthy, if you're up for it, And I said, I am. I am up for it. And I think if you have a thought or an inspiration, you should go with it and don't be afraid. Because I feel great. I really do. And I'm still ready. And he always told me he liked my spirit. And he said, he always would ask me, how is your spirit? And I said, and my spirit is good. And, and so he said, okay. And then, it was kind of a nice fall and winter, or fall and Nutcracker. I did chairman dances, I loved it. It's 10-minute just tour de force of the principal woman is just dancing the entire time. And I really loved it. And it's really his movement that I'm good at. And, like I said, Red Violin, after he left the company, I was still being cast in his ballets. It was sort of just a nice, closure to the whole story. I would have loved to end my career with him as my director. Absolutely. But it was really, really nice that we had that conversation and that I heard what he said, that he said to me, this thing that I thought in the beginning, I still think, and I was able to say, this dream I had in the beginning, I still have, so it was nice. And, I remember the last day I worked with him, it was one of the most special rehearsals I ever had. I debuted in Sugar Plum quite late. He gave that to me when I was 30. And I remember coming in to check my meal one day and being frustrated because, all of the new sugar plums had been learning sugar plum for weeks and weeks and weeks. And we were in the middle of Nutcracker. And I thought, maybe you're just not a sugar plum, Megan, and you're not going to do that role. And I walked into the mailroom and he was in there making his coffee. And I was like, this is like the last person I want to see right now. And, he turned around and he said, in 2 weeks it's Christmas. And I was like, okay. And he's like, I have a Christmas present for you. And I was like, what? And he said, you're going to dance. I went down my list and I looked at all the soloists and I thought, she would be a good sugar plum. And he's like, so you're going to do it in 2 weeks. And I remember without thinking, instead of saying thank you, the first thing I said, I sort of snapped and I was like, well, who am I dancing with? And he laughed because I think he knew, because of my body and stuff, it was important for me to be with someone that could take care. And he said, you're with Ask, who is, for those of you who don't know, a wonderful, tall Danish principal dancer in our company, a lovely partner and very experienced and, friendly with Peter. And so, that was my experience, like getting thrown into sugar plum, and all the new sugar plums had weeks and weeks and weeks of preparation. And I had 2, and for probably 5 days out of those 2 weeks, Ask was out of town doing gigs. But it was really lovely because my coaches were Peter. It was Peter and Darcy that taught us. But anyways, by the end, when he was leaving, I had at this point been doing sugar plum for I think 3 years. And I had different partners now. And I was working with Adrian Danchiguering, who's also a wonderful principal male dancer. And we had a stage rehearsal with just us and Peter and our pianist, Nancy McDill. And we knew that, he would be leaving. And he came down to the stage and he said, we don't have to do this if you guys don't want to. I know this is a very difficult day. If you don't want me to be here, I'll leave. If you don't want to do this, it's fine. I trust you guys. I have no worries. And, and people sort of didn't really know what to do. And we were tired, it was in the middle of the season and towards the end. And I just sort of took the opportunity to speak up. And I said, I think this is really hard for us for different reasons, but we have this half hour. And it was a rare moment in the theater where no one was around. It was very quiet and very empty. It was just the 4 of us. And I loved those moments. And I said, we have such beautiful music, Tchaikovsky, and we have such beautiful choreography by George Balanchine that I think it's wonderful for me and Adrian to dance it. I think it's wonderful for Nancy to play it, and it's wonderful for a person to watch it and hear it. So why don't we just, instead of thinking of this as a rehearsal or I think we all need something that's nice right now. And could we just do that? And it was just and he said, I think that is just so wonderful. And so it was just really lovely. And he said, do you want me to say anything? And we said, of course, and it was a really lovely final rehearsal because it was just very human. And I,
that's a beautiful story.
It was very special. Yeah. And it was special for me because of the role and the way I had been given it before. So
sure.
So
it was sort of bittersweet.
Yeah.
Right. So obviously Peter was really like the primary cheerleader for you, and the transition of him no longer being director may have been stressful, but you've still had these moments of finding artistic support from other people. One big opportunity that I sadly missed, but I remember being really excited for you and thinking if it's a very natural fit, is the Padda and Herman Schmerman, which you did with Aaron?
Yes.
Yeah. So what was that? I mean, so from the beginning, I think one reason why Peter, why when we were young, we speculated like, Megan has a sort of like Wendy-ish or Heather-ish look. So it's very easy to like see you in some of their roles. And that pas de deux is so Wendy. And I'm sure that that's something that you maybe had wanted to dance a long time, but it was in and out of rep it was out of the rep a lot of the time. So when it's back and, you maybe don't have your person at the helm anymore, but you still got this great opportunity.
Yeah. Obviously the transition was difficult as it, for me personally, as it was for everybody. But I think what helped me get through was, obviously the love for ballet and the love for the company and the love for the opportunities the company brings dancers and audience members and creative people coming in to collaborate with us. That doesn't go away. So yes, I was sort of able to find my groove again, so to speak, which I think came through, working with people that were coming into stage ballets, and William Forsythe was one of them. I was just so happy to be chosen to rehearse it. In the beginning, I was rehearsing the pas de deux and the the group, the dance for five people. And then I was just sort of called to the pas de deux with Aron. We were the second cast, and we worked very, very hard on it with his assistant, Noah Gelber. And it was a really great bonding experience for us. I've worked with Aron now in other ballets. Yeah, I think it was a nice distraction from the grief, to have something to work on, something different. Every piece of choreography, every choreographer sort of touches me differently. So this was, of course, different. But not as familiar and maybe not as personal. But it was important for me to, I think it was necessary for me to move on to that state as an artist, as a dancer, sort of out of this feeling protected zone into the world of working with different people. And it certainly challenged me physically. I, like you said, am more physically similar to Wendy and Heather. And my first cast has a body type that is just completely different from mine. Tyler Peck. She's a very petite and fast and concise. And William changed a lot of the steps for her. So it was a bit difficult for me because, the speed just was not there. And Ronan is also very long like me. And so we were trying to translate this into these sort of long body types. But we were very fortunate, and I felt very, I felt like I had kind of, what is the word? Like you put the chink in you move up like in your goals for yourself, sure. Like, by being chosen by him to perform, we were the second cast, so we got some shows. And so a chink in your belt, I think is the right word. I just felt like, okay, things have been tough, but there's still like progress like happening for you personally. And it was a really hard ballet for me, I will say. But I got the opportunity to do it again. It came back, and Tyler was injured. So we got to do more shows, which was great. Cause I think when you only do something once or twice and then you don't do it again for a year or never, it's hard to,
progress in it.
Yeah. Right. So it was nice for me and for us to kind of, get into that more. Since then, Ratmansky came, who I had never worked with because I'd been injured. So I had the opportunity to work with him on Voices, which was also, completely different. But I think it's really good to, in the end, to have those experiences that take you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So now we have the fun section of our interview, the last part where we just do our little lightning round, and we ask you a couple questions, and you just think of what comes to mind first. So,
oh gosh, okay.
So what's your a favorite ballet to watch?
Oh, Duo.
Duo's great.
Yes.
Great choice.
Great choice.
Yeah.
Favorite ballet to dance?
I love doing Sugar Plum in the Nutcracker, of course.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed dancing the chairman dances. It's not necessarily like a popular ballet, but I just really had a fantastic time.
Yeah.
Doing that.
What's a dream role of yours that most people wouldn't necessarily expect?
Aurora.
Okay.
Oh.
A tall Aurora coming out.
Probably one I'll never do.
That was great, Megan. Thank you so much for joining us. We can't wait to share with our
You're welcome. Audience. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us this week. If you would like to support the Conversations on Dance podcast, there are a few ways that you can help. Click over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. Download episodes when you listen to allow our analytics to better understand our listenership. Join our Facebook group, Conversations on Dance, Friends of the Pod, or you can offer a donation. Conversations on Dance has always been and will always be free to our listeners. You can help us continue to create and produce this unique behind-the-curtain look at the dance world by visiting conversationsondancepod.com/support. Thank you for tuning in. See you next week.